The air in the penthouse ballroom was thick with the scent of money and ambition. Crystal flutes clinked like wind chimes in a storm, each note a punctuation mark in the reverent whispers about Griffin Lewis. He stood near the panoramic window, a silhouette of power against the glittering city lights. A man carved from ice and iron, aloof, untouchable. The wolf a dozen sheep were desperate to impress. Chloe Lawrence stood in the shadows of a marble column, a silent offering in a borrowed dress that felt more like a cage. Her handler, a portly man named Mr. King with sweat beading on his upper lip, nudged her forward. "Griffin, my friend," King boomed, his voice slick with sycophantic charm. "A gift for your return. Pure, untouched. I've kept her aside just for you." Griffin's gaze swept over her. A brief, dismissive inventory that stripped her bare more effectively than any prying hands. He didn't see the terror in her eyes or the way her fingers trembled. He saw an object. "A commodity. I don't need her," he said, his voice a low, bored rumble. "Keep her for yourself." The words were a death sentence. Mr. King's smile faltered, replaced by a predatory gleam as he gestured to one of his burly associates. A thick hand clamped onto Chloe's arm, yanking her forward. A wave of nausea churned in her stomach. This was at the moment she'd be passed around, a party favor for vultures in tailored suits. "Wait!" Griffin's single word cut through the air, sharp as shattered glass. He hadn't moved, but his presence suddenly filled the space. The hand on her arm released its grip. All eyes turned to him. He took a deliberate step forward, his gaze finally locking onto Chloe's. A spark of something unreadable in their dark depths. "On second thought," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "this woman, I'll take her." He didn't ask. He declared. An assertion of ownership. A claim staked in front of them all. Later, in a sterile silence sweet miles above the city, the silence was more suffocating than the noise had been. Chloe hugged herself, the thin fabric of the dress a poor shield against the chill of the room, and the man watching her. "Why?" she finally whispered, the word raw and shaky. "Why did you do that?" Griffin loosened his tie, his movements economical and precise. "He was going to give you to his men. I considered it the lesser of the evils, so you bought me instead." Bitterness coated her tongue. The silence of the Lewis villa was a fragile thing, easily shattered. Chloe learned this when the door to her small, sterile maid's room clicked open in the dead of night. She bolted upright in bed, heart seizing in her chest, the thin blanket clutched to her chin. A tall silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the dim hall light, her figure of imposing stillness. Griffin Lewis. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft, final thud that echoed in the quiet room. The air grew thick, heavy with his presence. He moved with a predator's grace, his expensive suit seeming to absorb the shadows. "Don't you remember who I am?" he asked, his voice a low, chilling murmur that was nothing like the commanding tone he used in the rest of the house. Chloe's mind raced, replaying the desperate, anonymous night that had let her hear the night she'd sold her dignity for the first down payment on Remy's hospital stay. Her face burned with shame. "Mr. Lewis, you've made a mistake. I'm just a maid." He closed the distance between them into long strides. Before she could react, he had her pinned against the wall, one hand braced near her head, his body caging hers. His scent, a clean, sharp mix of sandalwood and power, filled her senses. She could feel the heat radiating from him. His eyes, dark and unreadable, scanned her face, lingering on her trembling lips. The silent intimidation was more terrifying than any threat. "I don't make mistakes," he stated, the words a simple, cold fact. "And I don't like being lied to." "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I need to sleep. I have to be up early." She tried to sound dismissive, to reclaim some sliver of control, but it came out as a pathetic plea. A sharp rap on the door made them both freeze. "Miss Lawrence, is everything all right?" I heard voices. An older maid's concerned inquiry came through the wood. Griffin didn't move, his gaze locked on hers, a silent order. Chloe swallowed hard, forcing her voice into a semblance of normalcy. "Yes, everything's fine, Martha. I just knocked something over. I'm sorry to have disturbed you." She waited until the maid's footsteps receded down the hall before letting out a shaky breath. Griffin finally pulled back, creating a space that felt both like a relief and a vacuum. He adjusted his cufflinks, his composure perfectly restored. "The price is the same as last time," he said, the casual cruelty of the words stripping the air from her lungs. He placed a thick envelope on her nightstand and turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Be ready." The door clicked shut, leaving her alone with the suffocating weight of her choices. She stared at the envelope, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over her. She could quit, she could walk out and never look back. But then she saw Remy's face, pale and weak in his hospital bed, and the thought evaporated. The $1 million surgery was a mountain, and this was the only path she had to climb it. The next morning, the exhaustion was a physical ache behind her eyes. Dark circles shadowed her face as she served breakfast to Griffin and his aunt, her hands steady only through sheer force of will. Griffin didn't acknowledge her, his focus entirely on his tablet. But she felt his awareness of her like a constant pressure. That evening, the pressure intensified with the arrival of Griffin's cousin, Felix. He was handsome in a flashy, predatory way, and the moment he saw Chloe serving appetizers, his eyes lit with a disturbing familiarity. "Chloe Lawrence, is that you?" he exclaimed, grabbing her wrist. "I knew you from my business class at university. What are you doing here dressed like that?" Chloe gently tried to pull her arm away. "Hello, Felix. I work here." His grip tightened, his smile turning into a possessive smirk. Throughout dinner, she felt his gaze on her, hot and unnerving. Later, as she was clearing dishes from a guest room, he cornered her, kicking the door shut. "Come on, Chloe. A girl as smart and beautiful as you shouldn't be a maid," he purred, backing her against a desk. "My uncle pays you." "What?" "A few thousand a month. I can give you more than that for one night." "Felix, please stop," she begged, her voice barely a whisper as his hands snaked around her waist. "Don't play hard to get," he snarled, his entitlement flaring into aggression. He leaned in, his mouth seeking hers, dismissing her struggles as a game. The door flew open with a deafening crack, slamming against the wall. Griffin stood there, his face a mask of cold fury. In a blur of motion, he crossed the room, ripped Felix off her, and slammed him against the opposite wall. The sound of the impact echoed, followed by Felix's strangled gasp. "Get your hands off what's mine," Griffin bit out, his voice dangerously low, each word laced with ice. He held Felix by the collar, his knuckles white. Felix, terrified and utterly cowed, scrambled out of the room the moment Griffin released him. The room fell into a tense silence. Chloe stood trembling, wrapping her arms around herself. Griffin turned to her, the fury in his eyes softening into something unreadable. He pulled out a checkbook, scribbled on it, and tore it out, holding it out to her. $100,000, he said, his tone back to its usual businesslike chill. "Quit this job. Go back to school. Get out of this house." Tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over, hot and bitter. The offer was a lifeline, but it was an anchor too, pulling her just far enough out of the water to let her drown more slowly. "I can't," she choked out, the words ripped from her throat. "It's not enough." His jaw tightened. "What do you need?" "My brother," she whispered, the confession tearing through her. He needs a heart transplant. The surgery. The aftercare is $1 million. I can't stop until I have it. Griffin stared at her, his expression unreadable as he processed the weight of her desperation. The vulnerability hanging between them was raw, a truth that changed the entire equation. He took back the check, tearing it into pieces. "Fine," he said, his voice decisive. "New arrangement. You will no longer work for my family. You will work for me personally, as my son's nanny, though he is at boarding school and will rarely be present. You will move into my private apartment. Your salary is doubled. You will cook for me and me alone. And you will re-enroll in your classes tomorrow. The money for your brother will be placed in an escrow account to be released upon the successful completion of your degree." Chloe stared at him, stunned. It was a cage, but it was a gilded one. A chance to finish her education. A secure path to saving Remy. A way out of this house and away from men like Felix. It was an impossible offer. A devil's bargain she had no choice but to accept. "Okay," she whispered, a single word sealing her fate. He simply nodded, his face impassive. An hour later, she was standing before the sleek, black door of his penthouse apartment. A security guard guided her hand to a biometric scanner. A quiet whir, a flash of green light, and the heavy lock clicked open. Her fingerprint was now a key to his world. Stepping inside, the door closing behind her, Chloe looked around the vast, minimalist space. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly his. He had solved her problems with the casual sweep of his power, providing a lifeline she couldn't refuse. But as she stood alone in the silence, she understood the truth of her new reality. She hadn't been saved, she had just been acquired. The university's recruitment fair was a chaotic symphony of ambition and anxiety. Amid the cacophony of recruiters and hopeful students, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Warm and steady. "Chloe Lawrence. I thought that was you." Chloe turned, her breath catching. Dr. Shepard, the man who had stitched a deep gash on her arm during a charity mission 5 years ago, stood before her, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. He was no longer a volunteer doctor, but the director of his own private hospital, a detail she gleaned from his name badge. "Dr. Shepard," she managed, a genuine smile breaking through her practiced composure. "I can't believe you remember me. A memory for faces, and you were a particularly brave patient," he said. He glanced at her resume, his expression turning serious. "A medical internship is what you're looking for. My hospital has a new program. Consider the spot yours." The offer hung in the air, a lifeline she hadn't dared to wish for. It felt like the first clean, untainted opportunity of her life. Over a celebratory dinner at a quiet, upscale restaurant, the future felt bright, a stark contrast to the shadows she constantly lived in. Dr. Shepard spoke of mentorship and her potential, his belief in her balm on wounds no one else could see. That fragile peace shattered when a cool, familiar voice sliced through their conversation. "Finding new part-time work already, Chloe?" Griffin Lewis stood by their table, a chillingly pleasant smile on his face that didn't reach his steel-grey eyes. The air crackled, the temperature dropping 10 degrees. He slid into the booth beside Chloe without invitation, his presence a suffocating weight. "Griffin," Chloe murmured, her posture stiffening. Dr. Shepard extended a hand. "Aaron Shepard." A friend of Chloe's. Griffin ignored the handshake, his gaze fixed on Chloe. "I found her at a bar. You know," he said to Shepard, his tone conversational, laced with poison. "She was looking for a way to make ends meet. I was happy to provide one." He let the words hang, each one a calculated blow to her dignity, painting her as a commodity he had picked up and paid for. A subtle war began across the table. Shepard, protective and disbelieving, tried to steer the conversation back to Chloe's academic achievements. Griffin, with surgical precision, dismantled every attempt, his anecdotes dripping with innuendo, reminding her of the transactional cage he had built around her. Chloe sat between them, a pawn in a game she didn't understand, her face burning with a shame so profound it felt like a physical illness. She fled the suffocating tension as soon as she could, her one bright hope now tainted by Griffin's possessiveness. The drive to her family home was a descent back into her grim reality. She walked in to find her mother and stepfather waiting like vultures. "Did you get it?" her mother asked, her voice devoid of warmth. "The new payment is due. Remy's medication, I'm working on it," Chloe said, her voice tight. Her stepfather, reeking of cheap whiskey and desperation, lurched forward. "Working on it. We know what kind of work you do. That rich bastard gives you everything. Where is it?" He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Don't hold out on us, you ungrateful girl. You're selling yourself anyway. At least make it worth our while." The accusation, so close to Griffin's veiled insults, struck her harder than a slap. When she couldn't produce the cash he demanded, his rage erupted. He raised his hand, but before the blow could land, a thin body threw itself in front of her. "Don't touch my sister," Remy cried, his small frame trembling but resolute. The stepfather shoved him, a single, violent motion. Remy stumbled back, gasping, his hand flying to his chest. His face, already pale from his chronic heart condition, turned a deathly shade of grey. He collapsed, his breath coming in ragged, shallow spurts. The world dissolved into a blur of sirens and sterile white walls. At the hospital, the diagnosis was catastrophic. Remy's heart, already fragile, was failing rapidly. The only option was an immediate artificial heart transplant. The cost, $1 million, her mother, hysterical, rounded on her. "You have to get it. Chloe, you hear me? Your rich boyfriend. Go to him. This is on you. $1 million, now." Desperation was a cold fire in her veins. Every humiliation, every sacrifice, had led to this. Remy's life hung by a thread, and the only person who could stop it from snapping was Griffin Lewis. She walked into the imposing lobby of Lewis Corp, a ghost haunting a palace of glass and steel. Griffin's assistant met her with a look of pity, informing her that Mr. Lewis was expecting her. A file lay open on the assistant's desk. Chloe caught a glimpse of Remy's medical chart and a financial summary of her family's debt. He already knew everything. The doors to his office opened, revealing a panoramic view of the city that seemed to mock her small, broken world. Griffin sat behind a massive desk, a king on his throne. The silence was absolute, broken only by the frantic beat of her own heart. "You're here," he said, not a question. She swallowed, her throat dry. "The offer you made to help me with anything, does it still stand?" The words were a whisper, scraped raw with vulnerability. He leaned back, steepling his fingers, his eyes cold and assessing. He let the silence stretch, forcing her to stand there, stripped of all pride. "You seem to be regretting your previous refusal," he said softly. "What's the emergency this time?" "My brother, he needs an artificial heart. The surgery is $1 million. Griffin almost smiled. $1 million? Is that all you think you're worth? Chloe, you're selling your entire future, and you're pricing yourself that low." The insult barely registered. Her world had narrowed to a single point of focus. "I don't care about me," she said, a voice finding a sliver of strength. "I just need the $1 million. For Remy." He watched her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, she thought he would refuse, that this was his final, cruel lesson. Then, he nodded slowly. "Fine. The money is yours, but the terms have changed. You will move into my penthouse permanently. You will belong to me, in every way the world can see." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "But I will not interfere with your work or your studies. Your internship with Dr. Shepherd is safe. Chloe's head swam with the dizzying terms of her surrender. Before she could process it, he delivered the final, stunning blow. "Don't look so desperate," he said, his voice dropping to a near-gentle tone that was more unsettling than his cruelty. "I paid the hospital 3 hours ago. I've also flown in the best cardiothoracic surgeon in the country. Remy's operation is scheduled for tomorrow morning." The scent of antiseptic was a welcome perfume. Chloe pushed through the door to Remy's room, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, and found him propped against a mountain of pillows, a weak but genuine smile on his face. The knot of terror she'd carried for weeks finally loosened. She rushed to his bedside, her hand finding his, her touch a silent prayer of thanks. Griffin stood near the window, a silent, imposing figure in a perfectly tailored suit that seemed to absorb the sterile white light of the room. He hadn't been obligated to be here, yet he was. His presence was a disorienting mix of comfort and complication. "Chloe," Remy murmured, his voice raspy. "The doctor said it went great." He turned his gaze to Griffin, his eyes wide with childish sincerity.